When they see me, they know that every day when I'm breathing, it's for us to go farther, you know? Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out. You know what I'm saying? Every time I speak, I want to shiver. You know, I don't want them to be like, they know what I'm going to say because it's polite. They know what I'm going to say. And even if I get in trouble, you know what I'm saying? Ain't that what we're supposed to do? I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world. And that's our job, is to spark somebody else watching us. We might not be the ones, but let's not be selfish, and because we're not going to change the world, let's not talk about how we should change it. I don't know how to change it, but I know if I keep talking about how dirty it is out here, somebody's going to clean it up.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.
Good evening, good morning, actually. If you are here right now watching this, you know this is highly unusual. Again, Uche and Njoku, Sneaker Principal Podcast. It is actually Sunday morning and not the 10 o'clock Saturday evening when I usually record this podcast. I feel like I owe you an explanation. Today was definitely, these past couple of days has been a little bit atrocious in the Njoku household. The heat has been barely working. So it took a while to get the folks out here to work on it, and they delivered some space heaters for us this morning. I mean, during the day, it was freezing downstairs. We had to keep the kids upstairs. I mean, a 2-year-old and a 11-month-old should not be in the cold, especially not when the temperature's been the way it's been in the Northeast. So they dropped off some space heaters this morning. They told us that they'll be back this evening, and they at 5:30-ish. They didn't start working until about. First of all, they didn't actually. One of the guys got here 6-ish, and they didn't start working on the heating system in the house until well after 7, and that work went on till about 11 o'clock-ish, and so it's been a little crazy in the Njoku household. You know, the kids' bedtime was completely thrown off, and the podcast at that point in time, it's. I mean, this is important, but I gotta take care of the family first. So, got the family to bed and got everyone to bed. Hopefully, it'll be a quiet night, and hopefully they'll sleep in late tomorrow. You know, babies, they do their own thing, especially the 11-month-old. He's wilding right now, but you know we love him, but he's wilding. The testosterone is kicking in. It's like 2 men in the house now. But yeah, so here I am after midnight, well, past my bedtime, sipping on some tea. Hopefully I don't fall asleep on y'all. No, I'm awake. So, what am I going to talk to you about tonight? So off the bat, there is something that has definitely been the topic of discussion with a lot of people that I know at work, on the news, and this has been going on for a while. But I think honestly, to be honest with you, I got hip to it more recently than others. It has to do with Gamestop. And if you go on YouTube and type in Gamestop, you're going to see millions of videos. It's like everybody's talking about Gamestop. And it's funny because I know I'm familiar with the stock market. I dabble in it. I have a couple of stocks in the portfolio, but I've never really committed myself to really digging deeper beyond what's on the surface. And this story is very interesting because for those of you who don't know, actually I'll explain to you in a little bit. But off the bat, this story's been very interesting because everybody's like going crazy. Like, you know, at work, people are talking about it. I'm seeing TikTok videos about it. You know, I'm reading that the memes that people are creating around stocks is actually fueling the purchasing of stocks, which is weird, very weird. So we're not talking about, the traditional where somebody told me that this stock over here, or, or the media pushing the stock. This has been completely driven by social media. And it's this battle between, quote unquote regular folk and the Wall Street establishment. I don't know how regular these regular folk are, but that's how it's being framed. But what's interesting in all of this is the fact that a lot of money, and this is not even, we're talking about billions of dollars going back and forth, and people are taking stance. This it's starting to remind me like back in the day when, not back in the day, but a couple of years back when they had the whole protest against the 1%. I forget what it was called, when people were, all these millennials or whoever the group were camping out and protesting big corporation. And this is weird because this is kind of the same thing, but we're talking about billions of dollars. So these regular folk are pumping billions of dollars, and it's a collective effort to push back the Occupy Wall Street. Thank you, my executive producer, who should be sleeping right now. Thank you, wifey. Occupy Wall Street. But so this is where it gets interesting to me, because as an educated man, an educated black man, I'm seeing that my white friends are speaking about what's happening with GameStop very articulately. I mean, they're going deep. They're breaking it down, and I'm sitting here thinking, but none of my black friends or my family members are even engaged in this conversation. Like, they're aware of it, but it's not even a conversation. And I'm like, why is this? Because the emotions around my white friends is like, this is crazy. Have you seen what's going on? And they're breaking it down. I'm sitting here thinking, wow, this is a very one-sided conversation. And even in the midst of that conversation, I had to be very conscious of what I didn't know. I mean, those conversations actually forced me to do some homework to really understand what's going on with GameStop. And again, I'm going to be honest with you. In my circle, no one's really talking about it. Like mine, African-American, Nigerian, black circle, no one's really talking about it. If they're talking about it, it's at the very surface level. This is what's happening in the news. Versus this other space where it's being discussed much deeper. So, as a result, I have to ask myself, what's going on here? And I think I know what it is. And some of you are going to be like, okay, here he goes again, like a broken record. It's called financial literacy. If you've never been acculturated or even educated on a topic, and if it's something that's so far removed from your realm of daily engagement, when it comes up, it might be interesting, but you have no teeth in the game. So it's like, you might have your 2 cents in there, but you're not engaged in it. You're not committed to those conversations. I think this was happening here. So I'm going to go deeper into that piece of it. But first, I want to share with those of you who might be sitting here saying, I don't know what's going on with GameStop. I don't know what's happening. I keep people talking about short selling and squeezing shorts and hedge funds and all these different things. It makes no sense to me. So I should put a timer on, but it's going to take me a while to put a timer on. So I'm going to try in 5 minutes or less, preferably less, explain to you short selling, short squeezing, and the parties that are involved in this debacle at GameStop. So, very simple. Let's say, for those of you who are listening to this, I'm a visual learner. So let's say my cell phone that's right here in my hand. Okay, it's like a gold. It's 100% pure platinum cell phone, right? It's platinum. It's, it has value to it. And my wife comes to me and says, now for legal reasons, let me not use my wife. Let me use somebody who is, so let's say a friend of mine comes to me and says, hey, can I borrow your phone? And I got like that. I got multiple phones, right? That are all platinum. So I'm like, you know what? Here, you can borrow this phone. Just make sure you get it back to me. And he's like, I get back to you. I'm like, take your time, but just make sure I get it back, right? So he takes this phone that's worth, let's say this phone is worth $20,000. Yeah, it's platinum, right? Let's say it's worth $200,000, this phone. Now, he says, I don't think that Uche realizes that, yes, it's platinum and everything, but they just discovered like a new source of platinum in somewhere in South America. So there's going to be more platinum in the market. So this $200,000 platinum phone will not continue to be worth $200,000. So there's a good chance. As a matter of fact, I'm betting that this phone is going to drop in value. Okay? It's going to drop in value very, very soon. But I also know people want this phone. So since Uche is letting me borrow this phone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the phone and I'm going to short sell it. What does that mean? I'm going to go out there and sell his phone. Okay? And some of you might be thinking, what do you mean he's going to sell his phone? Uche loaned it to you. Why are you going to sell his phone? But I'm getting to a point here. So this friend of mine takes this phone and he sells it to Robert. Robert buys the phone, but he's like, yo, you have one of those platinum phones? I've been looking for those. How much is it? $200,000? Here's the money, $200,000. So now Robert has the phone. And the friend of mine, Malik, now has $200,000. So he has $200,000 off of the phone that I borrowed a loan to him. He sold it to Malik. He sold it to Robert. So now Robert is like, yo, I got a $200,000 phone. It's worth $200,000. Then the next day on the news, it's announced that there's been all these deposits of platinum discovered in South America. So now the value of this phone is now half. Half, right? So Malik is like, I don't want this phone no more. As a matter of fact, the value is dropping rapidly. So I need to get my money back out of this. I know I can't get $200,000 for it anymore because it's not worth $200,000 anymore. Now it's worth $100,000. So Malik goes back to Robert and say, hey, Robert, you remember that phone I sold you? Yo, that's crazy what happened in the market, right? So what are you going to do with that phone? And Robert is like, yo, I need to get rid of this. Malik is like, I'll buy it from you for $100,000. And Malik is like, for real? Actually, that's not bad because the value has dropped. Okay, fine. I'll take it for $100,000. So now Malik pays Robert $100,000, gets the phone back, and then he returns the phone back to me. How much did Malik make? I gave him a $200,000 phone. He sells it to Robert for $200,000. Then the value drops because he had previous information or noticed something about this product. And all of a sudden now, Malik is like, yo, I just lost $200,000. But, I'm sorry, Robert is like, I just lost $200,000, but Malik is willing to buy it. So all of a sudden now, he sells it back. He gets $100,000 back. He's out $100,000, but he's like, you know what? It's better than being out $200,000. But now, Malik just got $100,000. Remember, he sold it for $2, bought it back for $100. So that balance he keeps, and he returns the phone back to me. That's what short selling is. Okay, you do the same thing with stocks. You go to your broker or whoever is handling your funds. You borrow stocks pretty much. It's more complicated than that, but you borrow stocks, and the way you do it is it gets more complicated with margins, and you have to have an account, and some amount of money is there. But for the most part, you're not really spending any of your money in this process. At least those who are doing this, if they're doing it the right way. And now they take something they borrowed, they sell it at the value of what it is at that moment in time, and with the focus on it dropping, in value. So now you can buy it back, return it, and keep the profit. This is what hedge funds do. Hedge funds managers, they dabble in risk. They do a lot of different things, derivatives trading and things like that. But short selling is a big thing that they do. And they make a lot of money. A lot of money. As a matter of fact, I don't remember his name, and I probably wouldn't even say it because I don't want to get attacked by those shadow figures out there. But it's a gentleman who is a big investor in his name's gonna come back to me in hotels. At the beginning of the pandemic, you know what he did? He went out on all the media outlets and was telling people like, "Oh my God, COVID-19, the hotel industry is over and done with. It's over and done with," and people started panicking. So people started selling their stock, and what did he do? He started buying them up. And this is that space. It's not the same space as short selling, but when you're able to manipulate the market. And people know there's some level of market manipulation that happens, to a certain extent. And the SEC and people and the regulators try to find ways to control it. But in this case, what happened with GameStop, it was exactly that. The hedge funds and different institutions were short. They were banking on GameStop's stock dropping to a point where they can now, do what they do with short selling. And as a result, a bunch of guys on Reddit, one of these Reddit groups, I think they're called Wall Street Bets, were like not having it, and I'm pretty sure millennials in that space who were fans of GameStop, even though GameStop's biggest issue is the fact that they sell hard copy games, and we live in a world now where everything can just be downloaded. And they've also had tons of business issues that have just not boded well for them. But these guys, for whatever reason, discovered that there's something weird was happening with them. Not something weird, but they discovered that these entities were hedging on GameStop failing so they can short sell the stock. So what they decided to do was like, okay, we're going to use that collective buying power to push the stock back up. Meaning, the stocks that they borrowed and sold, the institutions that they sold, and were waiting for the price to drop so they could buy it back, at a cheaper price, then keep the profit. What these people did was they ran up the price by buying. But that's the thing with stock, it's supply and demand. If people start buying it, then the value goes up, because if more people are buying it, then guess what happens? It goes up because people are trying, and it's just a supply and demand thing. So these people have pushed the stock from somewhere around $20 a share all the way up to over almost $400 a share. So the people who have their money stuck in this short selling scheme or whatever with GameStop are now freaking out. And who are these people? Very powerful, wealthy people. And from that point forward, this is what's going on right now. And those of you who are on Robinhood or any other TD Trade or whatever trading software, that there's been all this blocking of buying or of GameStop and other AMC and other stocks, because this is now turning into a crazy house, right? But what's interesting is people who are listening to this are now like, this short selling seems kind of crazy, right? Like, how is that legal? It is legal. But at the same time, what the guys are doing also with running up the stock, they're not really breaking any rules. It's just the way the system is set up. Kind of like when Trump told Hillary Clinton, I don't pay any, how do you say it? I don't pay any taxes because I'm smart, because he used the rules that exist to his benefit. So that's the deal going on. So I'm sorry, I thought I was going to tell what do I call it? Not short selling, short squeeze. So short squeeze is when you create a situation where now what the stocks they were thinking they were going to be able to buy back, now too expensive. So they're being squeezed out of being able to buy the stocks back. Because the thing now is, if that's that stock, like in the case of the phone, let's say that Malik was trying to buy the phone back from Robert, but all of a sudden they discovered that like there is no more platinum on the world. So the only platinum that exists are just what's out there. So that $200,000 phone now is worth $400,000. Guess what? Malik is screwed because he wants to get that phone back to get it back to me. He's gonna have to pay $400,000 or somewhere along those lines. But he only has $200,000. So he's gonna lose money to get it back to me. So now he's being squeezed out of that. And what am I gonna do? Malik, you better have my phone or you better have my money. And that's how the game works. So it's interesting. This whole thing is interesting. But but what's even more, I don't want to say it's more interesting, but what's traumatic for me is that in my trying to understand this space, I went on to the number 2 largest search engine in the world, which is YouTube. Number 1 is Google, and they own YouTube. So I went on to YouTube, and again, I'm a visual auditory learner, and I type in short selling Gamestop, and I'm scrolling through, and again, I'm looking through these, all the people who have videos, and I watch a bunch of videos, and I ask myself, are there any people of color who've made any videos about this? Like literally, because I'm like, I know we trade stocks, right? People are in the field. And I was literally just thumbing through page after page after page, and I came across one person. I just stopped there because I said to myself, I said, this is the problem. Because these people are playing games with money and doing these things that are illegal, and where are we in that conversation? Are black and brown people, or let's say specifically black people, so poor that we cannot engage in the financial markets, that we cannot play the game as well? Because what I'm seeing is people who are hustling in that space. They're literally hustling on Wall Street. Not that much different from hustling on the block. But the difference is their hustle doesn't have people trying to kill each other, or people, overdosing or whatever the case, or that happens in the space now in the hood. But it's still a hustle, and I'm thinking, do we have the brain power and capacity to have our own hedge funds to play in those spaces? Do we have that? So I decided to do some research, because I was like, just quick research, I started typing things up, because I wanted to see, like, why is that? Why is it the fact that, there are black people in Wall Street, and whenever they show them, they're touted as being like geniuses and amazing I would say this, not because they're not worthy of the praise, but because they're so rare. They're like unicorns. So when you see somebody, we see black and brown faces on Wall Street, they're truly minorities, and they tend to show the same people over and over again. My question is, how come we're not part of that conversation? How come we're not in those spaces? And my response is, like I said earlier, financial literacy, but I'm going to prove the point of why I believe it's financial literacy. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. So here, and for those of you who are listening, I'm going to explain to you what I'm showing here. First thing I wanted to know was, what is the median household income in the United States by race and ethnic groups? I wanted to know, is it, why we're not engaged as a people in these spaces, is it because of our finances? And off the bat, what I found was that and this is as of 2019, the median household income in the United States is, for Asians, is $98,174 a year. Okay, $98,000 a year. For Caucasians, white, not Hispanic, was $76,000 a year. For Hispanic, was $56,000 a year. And for black folk, $45,000 a year. So $98,000 a year for Asians, $76,000 a year for Caucasians, $56,000 a year for Hispanics, and $45,000 for Black folk. So we are damn near half of what Asians make. 2/3 of what Caucasians make, and we are, maybe an eighth or so of not an eighth. I would say 3/5 of what Hispanics make. So as a population, we get paid less. We make less money annually. So maybe that's a reason for why we're not engaged in the financial markets the way that other races are, right? So then I wanted to push my thinking process more, because I want to dig deeper. So with what we have at $45,000 a year median household income, what is our buying power? Like, as a people, where do we stand financially, right? So the next shot I'm showing you here is the U.S. buying power by race and ethnicity between 2000 and 2023. So they go from 2000 and they're predicting by 2023. So I'm going to pick the number that's closest to us right now, which is 2018. So check this out. The buying power of white people in America, okay, the buying power, okay, that means the collective incomes and the ability to, like, it's like the value, right, to the buying power, what collectively could be bought with the worth of the financial worth of these groups. For white folks, it's $12 trillion. Okay, not million, not billion, but trillion. 12 trillion. As a matter of fact, 12 trillion, $147 billion. Then in second place is actually Black folk. So the highest is white folks at 12 trillion. Then second place is really low. It's 1.3 trillion. It's still in the trillions. Okay. So again, mind you, listen to this. Okay. So according to the list, blacks are in second place. Actually, technically speaking, there's an asterisk, but Hispanics are in actually second place at 1.5 trillion. But the asterisk says because Hispanic is an ethnicity rather than a race, so that Hispanics can be broken down by race, because you have Afro Latinos, you have different, Latinos who are also Anglo. So if you say Hispanic, if you're from Spain, you're actually considered European. So that group is a little tricky, but just based on pure numbers here, and pure racial identities, white folk are at 12 trillion, black folk are at 1.3 trillion, Asians are at 1 trillion. So the U.S. buying power of black folks is actually higher than Asians. But if you go back to the previous chart, Asians are have the highest median household income, and we have the lowest. So I'm not sure how that math is done, but according to this, the buying power of black folks in America is $1.3 trillion. Second, behind white folks at 12 trillion. So we don't have 12 trillion, but we're at 1 trillion. The Asians are at 1 trillion, and then multiracial, and they have Native Americans, and the numbers drastically drop. So what does this mean? So I'm like, at 1 trillion, 1.3 trillion, what does that put us? Because that's a lot of money. So I was like, I want to compare this to what does 1.3 trillion mean? So what I did is I put up a chart of the gross domestic product of each country in the world. So this is it's more complicated, but I would say, for the sake of argument, the buying power of a nation. Okay. So now the gross domestic product of, so now if, so in first place is the United States at $19 trillion, which is interesting because white folks by themselves in the United States is 12 trillion. As a combined nation, we're 19 trillion. Second place is at, and this, I'm sorry, this chart here is as of, I want to say this is as of 2017. So not, it shouldn't be too off from where we are right now. So then China is at 12 trillion. Okay. So China's at 12 trillion, US is at 19 trillion. And then you have Japan, Germany, India, and the numbers keep going down. So you have, so US is number one, you have China, you have Japan, you have India, you have United Kingdom, you have France, you have Brazil, you have Italy, that's at 1.9 trillion. You have Canada at 1.6 trillion. You have Russia at 1.5 trillion. South Korea, then Australia is at 1.3 trillion. So, and then Spain is at 1.3 trillion as well. So pretty much based on this GDP of nations, if Black America was a nation of its own, it would be the 14th or 13th richest country on the planet. Okay. All right, just roll with me on this one here. Okay, now, the median household income in the United States by race has Black America at $45,000 a year at last place. In first place is Asian at 98,000, Caucasians at 76, and Hispanics at 56. Then we go to buying power. White folks in America at 12 trillion. Black folks at 1.3 trillion, and Asians at $1 trillion. So we're second place buying power in the country. Now, when you look at nations around the world, we would be number 15. Because Australia is at 1.323 trillion. Spain is at 1.314, and Black America is at 1.301, I believe. So they'll put us at 15th place. So technically speaking, as Black folks as a nation, we're wealthier than Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, Netherlands, Saudi Arabia. Our buying power is actually higher than Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Argentina, and pretty much the rest of the world. I mean, the rest of the world. So we're talking about a list that is of, whoa, I didn't even realize there's this many countries. So out of 190 nations, Black America would literally be number 15. Okay. So what's the problem here? What is the problem here? Nick Schroeder says we should limit buy over the weekend at closing price or no. The question is, should we limit buy over the weekend at closing price or no? So if there's a stock purchasing question, I'm the wrong person to ask that question to, because that is not my area of expertise. I am an educator. But whatever you choose to do with your money when it comes to with stocks and everything, just be careful. Seek the advice of a trustworthy financial advisor. I'm not the one, but I'll just tell you, put the money in my bank account. But so this is where we stand right now. But now, my question is why? How is it possible? Lowest median household income, the second highest purchasing power, which puts us, if we were a nation by ourselves, would put us at number 15 on the planet. Okay, and we're talking about as Black Americans as a nation. If we were a nation by ourselves, we'd be number 15 on the planet. So what's going on here? What's the disconnect? Nick, yes, no, not a problem, not a problem. Not a problem. This is what I do. Even in the classroom, my students, interruptions are, it's all good. So now what's the disconnect? That's what I'm trying to figure out here. What's the disconnect? So I'm going to share with you something, and this is the final thing I'm going to share. So there's an article, and this article is from the FAMU. So this is I believe this is Florida AMU, Florida A&M University did an article, and I've actually seen these numbers in other spaces as well. But here, I'm going to read this to you. Okay, it says the common recurring statistics in money circulation within communities, according to NAACP and other organizations, suggest that black dollar is unregulated. Studies say that the average lifespan of the dollar is it's approximately 28 days in Asian communities. So when the money comes in, whether it's through financial transactions like buying from an Asian business or from a business, or people earn money. So this is numbers based on how long that money stays in each racial community. So in the Asian community, when a dollar enters their community, it stays in the community for 28 days. Okay, it stays in the community for 28 days. That means that dollar is spent and circulated within the community. That means if it's my money, I go to the store in my community, I spend it in with another Asian. It goes, if I go to the barber shop or whatever the case is, all within the community. Then at some point in time, it will leave, because if I go to Macy's to buy some clothes, then that dollar now leaves back into the general American population. So the dollar stays the longest in Asian communities, and that's 28 days. In the Jewish community, it stays for 19 days. In the white community, it stays for 17 days. Okay? So again, 28 days in the Asian community, 28 days. So that's a month. Then we're talking about 19 days in the Jewish community, 19 days. So a little over half a month. Then 17 days in the white community, which is half a month. Now, guess, how long does a dollar stay in the black community in America? I shared these statistics with my students, and you could hear a pin drop. Someone give it to you. 6. 28 days in the Asian community, 19 days in the Jewish community, 19 days in the Jewish community, 17 days in the white community, but 6 in the black community. Oh, let me correct that. 6 hours. Not 6 days. 6 hours. 6 hours. How is that possible? It's possible because, first of all, before I go into how is that possible, it's very clear based on these numbers. Hopefully these numbers are correct, but I've seen these numbers over and over again in different spaces. A $1.3 trillion buying power means there is money that comes in the hands of Black America. But when it comes into our hands, what do we do with it? Where do we put our money? Or do we just buy? Do we just get the money and spend it? And that's a deeper question because I'm pretty sure, I wish I could have I wish I can find a economic theorist who can now kind of try to break this down. But regardless, the numbers don't lie. The money is there. It just doesn't stay long enough, because 6 hours means literally one of two things. Either the money comes in and we immediately spend it, or the money comes in and it's already spent before we can even do anything with it. And if it's anything like the household I grew up in, the latter actually made more sense. It never stayed long enough because of debt and things of that nature. So that money never stayed long enough for it to have a purpose within the community. So okay, actually, I'm just reading this. I'm just reading what Nick S says right here. He says, assets. When an individual values money as equity or assets, you will, or as equity or assets, you will acquire neither. Okay, that makes sense. Fiat currency doesn't make you wealthy. Value to your own fellow man does. You know, and that's, you know what, I agree with you 100%, because I actually I actually spoke about this in another video that I did about fiat currency, you know, and what value we put value in. And I know what you said in the back end, value to a fellow man. And sometimes I wonder, how do you create value for your fellow man? How do you create value in your community? You know, right now we know, I mean, based on the data I just shared with you, we know a couple of things. The money does reach us. It just doesn't stay long enough. Why is that? And I'll propose reasonings having to do with things like, you know, debt and lack of education. What do we do with our money? In my financial literacy matters episodes that I do on Wednesday night, we've been talking about like the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, and the 7 cures for a lean purse. And the first cure is, you know, to yourself, take out 1/10 of everything you earn and put that to the side. Live off of the 90%. You know, like philosophies like that. You know, how do we build wealth and equity? How do we now take monies like that and build businesses in our community? How do we become self-sufficient so that money circulates within ourselves? And a lot of that has to do with education. And I'm going back to what I said in the beginning. We don't have financial literacy. We don't teach it. We don't understand it. And it's like it's almost like rocket science. And that's a problem. That is a major problem. And I would say not just for the Black community, because I would say for poor people in general. You know, and once upon a time, financial literacy was actually part of the curriculum in schools. You know, ensuring that people understood how to budget and finance and how things worked, and it was taken out. It was taken out, and according to what I read, that the Rockefeller family, John D. Rockefeller, was a big part of the lobbying that removed that from schools, and his reasoning was, I don't want thinkers, I want workers, which would make a lot of sense, because if you ask most of my students, you ask them, so what's the purpose of an education? Why you have to go to school and get good grades? And I would say 8 times out of 10, probably more like 9 times out of 10, the answer you're going to get is so I can get a good job, or I can go to college and get a good job. But a good job is always on there, on the list. And somebody might say, why's that a problem? But if your purpose is to get a job, then you've actually fulfilled the need and wants of John D. Rockefeller, which was to have workers. Why does he want workers? Because in the Industrial Revolution of companies and factories, you wanted people who would come in here, sit down, shut up, and just do what I tell you to do. Put part A into part B and move and keep moving. But the whole notion of actually building wealth, starting your own business, understanding how these markets work and everything else, if you don't understand it, guess what happens? Then you have to have somebody do it for you. That's why people, you know, invest into retirement plans at their work, and half the time they don't even know what's going on in there. They just know they're putting money in there, and they're crossing their fingers hoping that it will grow into something. But they don't even understand why it's growing, why it's not growing. And if you think about companies like Enron and you think about people like Bernie Madoff, and you think about all these people on Wall Street who, at the end of the day, their purpose is to make money for the upper echelon of society, then it makes you wonder, like, okay, maybe I need to know more. And these people, these hooligans, whoever I forget what they call themselves, that the degenerates, Wall Street Bets, you know, they've proven how if you have enough knowledge, you can manipulate the markets. You can go in that space and compete, and that's what they've been doing. They've been competing, and right now I'm hearing the hedge funds out there who are like, we're gonna go bottom up because we put so much money into GameStop and all these other companies, and here are these people who were just individuals collectively who are now pushing back against what we've been doing for years and making a lot of money for years. You know, so that's a good point. Nigga says, personally, I think it's because when you come from struggle, you want a quick fix. I'm a child of trauma, so I'll do what I can for a buck. You know what? That's the thing. When you're coming from it's funny. Poor communities are called ghettos, and I remember when the first time I understood what a ghetto was, but the word ghetto was what was used in World War II to describe the spaces, the neighborhoods, the communities where the Jews were forced to live in, you know, the ghettos. And when you watch films, when I studied film in college, and I've seen footage from those places, and it was crazy. War zones. I mean, it was crazy, and curfews and all this. Like it was just a space that would just gave you dread and trauma, and that's what we call poor neighborhoods in America or around the world. And those spaces are often formed around trauma. And when you have that kind of level of trauma in your psyche, you go into the real world, and it's all about the quick fix. It's all about the quick buck. It's all about you know the hustle. But I believe if we teach and start to instruct our children on how the world works and start giving those knowledge, I guarantee you something's going to happen. If we're preparing them not just to go be workers, but be creators, and to bring value to your community. Maybe that $1 trillion could put us in a better space than we're in right now. And that's the thing. You know, this year I told myself that I was going to focus a lot of the podcast and my content around really coming up with solutions on how do we become more practical as far as how we improve the financial state of our children, okay, for the future. How do we ensure that we're creating spaces academically for them to thrive outside of the classroom? You know, how do we start to take back our historical identity by making sure that financially and academically we're starting to lay the bricks and the foundation for them? Because what GameStop has showed me is that anything is possible if the people are on the same page together. What can happen with 1.3 million buying power if just 10% of that money is focused towards doing good for the collective? Guys, don't worry about that. I mean, there's a good 5-second delay, so that's not an issue at all. So keep sharing your thoughts. That's a good thing. But yeah, so this is a space that I'm really thinking about, and I'm really thinking about okay, I can keep saying it, but what's going to be my part in all of this? What is going to be my part? What is it that I'm going to do to really not just say we need financial literacy? This semester at my school, I'm teaching a financial literacy class, and I've been buying books and trying to figure out like how do I frame this in a way where my students start to really understand beyond just, I don't want to sit there and say, hey, what is a checking account? What is a savings account? No, they need to understand in a much more deeper way, because the way the financial markets work is what really runs our country. It's really what determines how our communities are. You know, that's why job reports impact the stock market. That's why, you know, if something happens in one part of the country, it can literally have an impact on the stock market because it's intertwined. So the question is, not even the question, the work is to really find ways to really embed this work, because I speak to a lot of people and they all say the same thing. I wish I had that when I was a kid. So I'm starting in my school, but I want to do more. I want to do way more, and I've been thinking really hard on how to create spaces, not just for my students in my classroom, in my school building, but create spaces for kids all around the country, also families to really engage. Because my thing is this: you might not have had a solid financial education when you were younger, but you can start now, and especially you can provide that for your children. You know, provide that for your children, because the reality is, wealth takes time to build, and depending how old you are, you might be out of the window to build true wealth, outside of coming up with a great idea, starting a great business or a great invention. But the traditional way of building wealth over time that can be passed on, you know, that is something we need to learn how to do. Because if we start investing for our children, we start doing things like, you know, understanding how to start building up their credit when they're young, so that by the time they're 18, 19, you know, with understanding about programs that exist for young people with a college degree to buy a house as soon as they graduate. All these little things are out there, but often not spoken about in our community because we're disenfranchised from those conversations. And I want to change that. I really want to change that. And I'm a sole voice in the wilderness, but I believe there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way, who feel the exact same way. I'll put this up here. Nikia says, do you think this is more movement versus an economic gain? I know several people who are all in and willing to lose it all for the cause. So that's a good question. As far as the people who are doing this right now, people who are engaging in this whole thing with GameStop and other stocks. And I'll say this: you always have people who are idealists. They will jump into things because they believe it and it's what they want to do. And then you're gonna have those who have ulterior motives. But that's human nature. I'll give an example: Black Lives Matter. Over the summer, there were people out there who were like, listen, we need to protest peacefully, and we need to make sure that they see us. You know, we just have to be there together. They cannot ignore us when we're 10,000 deep. Then you have some other people who are like, nah. We gotta make some noise. We gotta break some stuff. We gotta burn this joint down. And that was their stance. Because we're tired and we need to be seen, heard, and felt. But then there were those who were just kind of like, while y'all are doing what you're doing, I'm going to take some stuff for the sake of just taking some stuff. I'm going to do some stuff just for the sake of just doing it. I'm going to have me some fun. And that's always going to happen. You know, and I believe that with this whole thing with GameStop and this whole thing with Wall Street right now, there are those who are doing it because they feel like, morally speaking, that the system is not fair and it's not right that the powerful get to do whatever they want to and play and manipulate the rules. And then there are those who are saying, but first of all, I understand that if we squeeze the short, squeeze the short sell and push the numbers up, we can make some money, because if I buy the stock cheap and we all collectively put in money and buy more stock and the value goes up, I can sell and pull out. So my $20 investment in a company that was on its way down, that's now worth almost $400, I'm walking away with a crazy, profit margin. And that's something that's always going to happen. The value towards what's right and the value towards what's profitable is always going to be there, and there's nothing we can do about that. I think we all have a little bit of that in us. Question here: can you define wealth? I think that would really help. Wealth. So, financially speaking, this is what I define as wealth. Wealth is that thing that can live beyond you. So I'm going to give you a biblical example. Abraham, father of Isaac. If you read about Abraham, this man he was blessed. It says it was blessed. The only thing he didn't have was children, and eventually he had Ishmael and he had Isaac, and then Isaac inherited the wealth from his father, right? But I would even argue that he not only did inherit the wealth, he also learned from his father on how to manage that wealth, And then the time came, Isaac was old and he was about to pass. And he had two twins. He had twin sons. He had Esau and he had Jacob. If those of you know in the Bible, Jacob the trickster, tricked his brother. He tricked his father so he can get. Jacob and his mother colluded. No collusion. They colluded to trick Isaac to bless Jacob and not Esau. And he blessed Jacob. Jacob knew it was wrong because he dipped because Esau was pissed because he was like, that was blessing was mine because I'm the oldest son. Jacob ran off, and the wealth ended up going to Esau because he was the oldest son, and he managed that wealth and he grew that wealth. But then Jacob went on and had no money, but you read that he was able to build his wealth. A little trickery in there. He built his wealth, and he was just as wealthy as his brother. And for me, the wealth is not the money itself. The money, it's really the foundation. When you grow something, then everyone in your bloodline is trained on how to manage that wealth going forward. Because then it went from Jacob. Then remember, Jacob had 12 sons, and second to the last son was Joseph. What happened to Joseph? His brothers threw him into a hole and sold him into slavery. Okay. He went on to Egypt, but guess what? His teachings, his understanding, and it doesn't go into those details. But I'm like, you gotta learn something. If you are in a space of wealth, because he wasn't poor, he found himself in a poor situation because of what happened and what his brothers did. But he found himself in Potiphar's right? Potiphar's house, and all the drama happened with Potiphar's wife and all that stuff. But eventually he went to jail, and there was a lot of things that was very clear that Joseph knew, and I would have to argue he learned that from his father. That wealth, was started by Abraham, passed on, but how to manage the wealth and how to grow the wealth went from father to son, and Joseph ended up being the chief financial officer of Egypt. And I don't think that was just because of dreams. The dreams foretold what would happen, but his skill set that he got from his father, that was the foundation of wealth. So wealth is knowledge, and wealth is also what you do with that knowledge to build that foundation. Then when you have that foundation, your knowledge will continue to grow that. And that's the thing that's missing in our spaces. We're not building wealth, both economically and educationally. We need to be educating the right things to ensure that we are building wealth into the future. So hopefully that was helpful as far as that definition is concerned. Some people might disagree with me, but again, for me, wealth is financial. It's also education. But the thing too is, if you don't have the right tools, listen. How many NBA players, NFL players, professional athletes make a lot of money? Then 20 years later, they're broke. And a lot of times that has to do with the fact that they don't have education. Nick, thank you. You said so thankful I stumbled across your channel tonight. Thank you. Thank you. I love how you spent 10 minutes defining the wealth and didn't mention anything about currency. We respect education. Currency. Listen, currency. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Education is the key, but currency itself, unless it has specific weighted value, it's kind of imaginary. You know, you have to kind of flow with the system. Think about it. When you get somebody gives you a piece of paper and says this is worth something. It's a contract. That dollar bill's a contract. But what is it backed against? You know, those of you out there who are chasing after paper and you want to walk around with bundles of paper in your ear and you want to have these stacks, buy land. I have a friend of mine who told me the story about how his grandfather owned acres and acres of land in Mississippi. Like, I'm talking about like over 100 acres in Mississippi. And this is the black man, you know, who built it over time from Jim Crow era and all that stuff. He acquired a lot of land in wilderness, but it was his. And he would tell me if he ever needed money, a quick money, because for whatever was happening, you know, which was rare because he lived off the land. You know, he had a farm and he had animals and everything else. His family was good. But he said if they ever needed money, like cash, he would call the lumber people to come through and cut down a couple of trees. And a couple of those trees could equate to $50,000, $60,000. A couple of trees. I'm thinking to myself, that's powerful. Because he can go to the bank and get a loan and play with that paper money, or he can have tangible assets. You know, that land he had was wealth. And guess what? It's being passed on to the next generation and next generation. And I'm saying that's real wealth right there. That's real power. Because guess what? The dollar can lose value, but that land is always going to be yours. You know, so all right, guys, thank you so much. It's an hour, and I try to stay within an hour. I appreciate you allowing me to come into your space and, you know, and ramble on. But at the end of the day, I hope that this channel and and these words are helpful in guiding you in your journey in your movement in this world. But we live in a world right now that's a little crazy. And we need to be on top of everything, and my part of the world right now is education, and again, like I said, I'm working on something. I have an idea, and hopefully, those of you watching this space can help me move this idea forward. Because again, we have to do more. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for this evening, Nick S. You're a good dude. Thank you for asking questions and guiding my thought process. I love the question about wealth, because now I have to go write down what I said, because I'd never actually been asked that question before. So again, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Be safe. Love yourself, love your family, and I'll see you guys next week. All right? Peace.
And now he's been promoted.